How's it, guys? Welcome back to another video here at Addict Shooting and Tactical, and today we are going to be going through the basic steps that you need to know when you learn to shoot a compound bow. So with step one, I like to start with our base, and what I like to do is take an old arrow or any one of the arrows, extra arrow you have lying around in your quiver or somewhere, and you put that in line with the target in front of you. You're going to take your feet and you're going to put your toes on that arrow that you've just put down, again in the shooting line with your target. That creates a visual connection with your base, so you don't stand uneven or you're 1 foot behind and the other one in front, and I explain to you why that's important. So this is going to create that visual connection with your footing. And the other thing what it does is, if your footing is too far back or too far forward, it rotates your hips. So you want your hips to be in line or square to your target. If your back foot's too far forward, you rotate your hips in the wrong direction, and if your back foot's too far back, you rotate your hips in the opposite direction, having you to have to twist your body to get on target. And later when you get tired, you're going to find your body's going to naturally want to drift back into that normal position. Right, guys, our second step, which is a really basic step but a very important step, and I've seen it happen so many times. Guys forget to do this, and that's so simple, and that is merely just to take your arrow and put it in your bow. So don't forget step two, it's really important. You don't want to end up dry firing your bow. Alright, our next step, our third step, is going to be our grip. So I like to get my grip before you draw the bow. So what I would do is I'd get my hand into the bow, get your nice comfortable grip. We're going to explain to you the correct position on the grip now. And then from there you'd clip your trigger on and draw. The reason I'd like to get your grip before drawing is, if you draw your bow and then try to get your grip afterwards, you tend to manipulate the bow or torque the bow in a certain angle, which can affect your accuracy and your shot. So our proper grip form is not a grip where you hold onto the grip or choke the bow, which we would say, is you're going to take your hand and you're going to take your knuckles and you're going to turn it out of 45 degrees. So instead of your knuckles being parallel with the bow like this, you're going to take your knuckles, turn it out 45 degrees, kind of cock your hand a little bit back as if you were leaning on the wall type of thing. So that's going to go straight into your bow grip, knuckles at a nice 45 degree. Going to get these fingers tucked out to the side a bit, which is going to help. Right now I'm holding my bow with my thumb and my index finger. My thumb is going to point towards my target, which shows me that my grip is in the correct position. And then from there, obviously clip the trigger and draw, and you want to maintain that grip through the draw. You don't want to change it or torque the bow or anything like that. It's going to manipulate your shooting. The other reason why we're going to have our hands at a 45 degree, or the front hand at a 45 degree, is also to help get your arm out the way a bit. The minute you hold onto the bow, a solid grip like this, your arm tends to bulge out the sides here, and a lot of the time when people shoot, the string comes forward, hits you on the arm and leaves you with a nasty bruise or quite a sore on the arm. So the minute you take your hand and you turn it out at a 45 degree, you start pushing on this meaty part of your thumb, you're going to get the arm bending out just a little bit to the side, which is going to give you a lot more clearance on that string, so you're not going to have your string slapping your arm over there. Right, guys, we're on step 4, and it's a very basic step, but there are a few components that I'd like to explain quickly that's going to definitely aid you in shooting a bit better. The first thing would be to clip your trigger on after we've got our grip correct. You want to kind of shift your weight a little bit onto the front foot, so you're going to shift about 70-30, and the reason we shift our weight onto the front foot is, as you draw your bow back, you're going to rock back, that you have your weight 50-50 distributed over both feet, giving you a nice solid line down the center of your body. You're not going to be ending up where, guys, if you draw too high poundage or you get tired, you tend to draw your bow and the hips tend to go forward and the elbow comes down at the back. So a lot of the time, just shift the weight onto the front foot a bit. As you draw, rock back, center the weight, which will give you a nice solid footing and a good form where you're not going to be kind of lounging through the shot a bit. Another thing when drawing the bow back, guys, is when you draw back, you don't want to have your bow pointing very high into the sky, so no sky draws, because that's unsafe. You don't want to have your bow pointing down to the ground, because if the shot does go off and the arrow hits something in the ground, it can come back at you. So let's try not to be unsafe. Try and draw your bow either on the target or just above the target. I like to draw just above the target, because what that does is, when I get to the back, I can settle my shoulder. I don't have to use power in my arm, and I don't have to use muscle to physically lift the bow up, creating, you don't fatigue and you don't get tired in the shoulder when you have to lift it up all the time. So I draw just above it, and then I tend to relax down onto the target. And then lastly, when drawing your bow, you don't want to draw that your elbow comes down to the side like this, because that's going to put a lot of strain on your rotator cuff, and you're using your bicep to kind of draw the bow back. You want to try and have your elbow rotating up over the top, engaging those back and lat muscles, which are going to give you a much easier draw, and you're not going to be damaging your shoulder at all. Right guys, that's going to help us, and we're going to be moving now on to our next step, and that's going to be anchor point. Now the anchor point, I feel, is one of our most crucial steps. The anchor point is the place that creates consistency, and in archery, consistency is key. So when you draw your bow back, we've gone through that, you want to hit a nice solid anchor point. My anchor point is generally my index finger knuckle, right in the little denture which your jaw and your earlobe tend to come together. It makes a little dent there. So when I draw back, I'm trying to push my knuckle into that little dent over there. At the same time, I can feel my string go from the tip of my nose to the corner of my mouth. And the reason why I like that is because if you only have the one and you have rotation in your head, you're actually moving the back end of your arrow, which is going to affect your shooting and accuracy. So the minute you have 1, 2, 3 points of contact, you can't go wrong with that. You'll have a solid anchor point, and the consistency will always be there, and your accuracy will just get so much better. Right guys, you're going to see now my anchor point. I'm just going to go through the steps quickly. I got my base, I've got my arrow in, I've got my grip, I've got my trigger clipped on. I'm going to lift the bow up towards my target. I'm going to rotate my shoulder back, pull my elbow back nice and high over, find my anchor point, drop my nose onto the string, lift my finger, feel nice and comfortable, and then when I'm ready, I'm going to squeeze through the shot. Right, that brings us to our next step, guys, which I find is a very, very important step, step 6. And that's to aim. So many people make the mistake of having to look at your pin rather than aiming on your target. So you want to focus on what you want to hit at. And remember to aim small to minimize your miss rate. So if you have a big target and you're aiming for a big spot like this, your grouping is automatically going to feel like comfort zone is going to be this big. So if you aim at a much smaller target, you're not going to have such a big miss rate, because you're focusing so much on that smaller center spot than such a big target, which gives you a little more relief on your mind to say, it's okay to miss a bit because the yellow is this big, rather than going, I need to hit the X, which is a little spot in the middle. Again, remember to focus on your spot that you want to hit, rather than focusing on your pin. If you get all those steps right, aiming is going to be a breeze. Right guys, this brings us to step 7. Our second last step, and that's to initiate a squeeze on your trigger. Guys do shoot different styles of trigger, whether it's a index finger release, whether it's a thumb release, whether it's a back tension, a hinge release. They're all going to have a different kind of squeeze. I'm not going to go into all of them now. I'm going to go into our most popular trigger, which is our index finger release, and that's the guys make the biggest mistakes that I see. So when they get their bow drawn all the way to the back, they get to the anchor point, they're nice and comfortable, they're aiming, and then as their pin is floating over their target, they tend to take their finger, put on the trigger, and then slap the trigger. You don't want to do that. You end up smacking the trigger, and you're basically having a static shot, and you diverting your attention from aiming, and you're telling your brain, hit the trigger now, which you don't want to do. What you rather want to do is have a little more tension on the back, so when you get to the back wall of your bow, you're not going to relax too much. You're going to apply a little more squeeze and a little more tension on the back. You're going to lift your finger, put it on the trigger, feel the trigger with your finger. So lightly touch it without it going off. Keep aiming, and then tell your brain to slowly squeeze the trigger, which gives you enough time to focus on the spot you want to hit and wait for the shot to go off on the spot. You'll find the minute you squeeze through the shot, you'll get a lot more consistent arrows, you'll find it'll be a lot more accurate, and the shot will break much cleaner, rather than you having to say, okay, smack the trigger now when the pin is on the spot. So remember, squeeze through the shot, don't lift your finger and hit the trigger, rather feel the trigger very lightly with your finger and then squeeze through the shot. And that's going to bring us to our last step, which is going to be step 8. Right guys, our last step is step 8. And our step 8 is just a basic follow through. So what a follow through is, once you have your bow up and you've drawn it back, you've gone through all the other steps, you're on the shot, you're about to shoot, you squeeze the trigger, but you anticipate the shot and you drop the bow. You're going to get your shots bottoming out, shooting very low. So what a follow through is going to do is going to help you keep your bow arm up, and it's going to help the arrow leave the bow completely. Everything's going to stay nice and stay nice. Everything is going to stay nice and no, I don't want to say static. Everything is going to react how it's supposed to. The bow's going to fire the arrow out. You're going to have a nice break, so you're going to have your bow back. You're going to squeeze and the shot's going to break. So you're going to feel with a little bit of tension, you're going to break a little bit, and that's going to give you a good follow through. Remember just to keep your bow hand up for that second longer. Kind of see your arrow through your sight all the way to the target, and that's going to give you much better consistency. You don't want to have your arm bottoming out or you dropping the bow when you anticipate the shot as you squeeze through the trigger. Right guys, thanks for tuning in once again. And just on a quick note, these 8 steps are just a basic guideline for anybody who's trying to get into shooting or learning to shoot a compound bow. So it's not for advanced archers, it's just to help the beginner guys get your basic steps right. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment down below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and hope to see you guys tune in on any further videos that we do on our channel.